Guten Erev Shabbos. Last week we started discussing this very interesting question of how does a person who is a true believer in Hashem deal with challenges which seem to be insurmountable. We quoted the Tzemach Tzedek, who says in Derech Mitzvah that the whole purpose of Yeridas HaNeshama Lemata, of the Neshama coming down from heaven and clothing itself in a body, is for the purpose of Nisyonos, is for the purpose of tests, of challenges, that we are challenged in our lives to maintain proper belief in Hashem, regardless of the circumstances and regardless of the vicissitudes of life. Indeed, the Rebbe once explained that a nisoyan, a challenge, is like a ladder. A person finds himself in the middle of a ladder. The ladder has the ability, if you keep on moving and you overcome your test, you will reach the highest rungs in heaven. If, however, you are not successful to withstand the challenge, then you fall to the ground. And the purpose is for each and every one of us to utilize the particular ladder, e.g., difficulties and challenges that we have to reach our level of heaven, to reach our purpose of creation. We've also brought the statement, no pain, no gain, in the same way that physically you need, when you do exercise, to improve your bodily health. When you have pain, that's an indication of there being a gain. Spiritually, the same applies to the neshama. The difficulties, the travails, the problems, it cause gain and improvement in the level of the neshama. However, what we need to understand is that no two people are alike, and the challenges that we face and confront are totally different to any challenges that anyone else confronts. In the same way that physically no two people are alike, no two people have the same fingerprints, no two people, the Medrash says, are the same, in the same way that no two snowflakes are exactly the same. Furthermore, today, with DNA, we know that no two people have exactly the same DNA, with very minor exceptions. So in the same way that we are all different, in the same way our souls are different. The capacity of our souls are different. No two people are alike. The challenges that we face are not the same. And for that reason, we are told in Pirkei Avos, we are told in the ethics of our fathers, Al toden es chavercha ad shetagia lemekoimai. Do not judge your friend until you are able to stand in his place, which of course is an impossibility because we are who we are and our friend is who our friend is. We are different background, educationally, family-wise, genealogy point of view. no two people are the same and are able to be judged. That is why we are told that we must always judge our friend favorably. Why? Because it is impossible to know, even if we see that the other person has committed an action which in our eyes seems to be wrong and evil, but in actual fact we do not know the person's motivation, we do not know what makes him tick, we do not know the circumstances which have brought the person to that particular stage. And therefore we need to understand that we are all different, our challenges are all different. Now we need to understand this in a more mystical and spiritual level. I'm going to share with you a beautiful explanation of the Baal Shem Tov. There is this Mishnah, again in the Ethics of Our Fathers, Ezehu Osher Hasameach B'Chelkoi. Who is a wealthy man? A wealthy man is a person that is satisfied with his portion. Now, naturally, we understand this to mean that you are satisfied with what you have and you do not desire to have what somebody else has. It is interesting, just as an aside, the Yalkut Me'am Loyes brings an interesting interpretation on a Zeu Osher HaSameach B'Chelkoi. Who is a wealthy man? He that is satisfied with his lot. And he explains that the word Oshir is a word of 4 separate letters. Ayin, Shin, Yud, Resh. Ayin represents Einayim, the eyes. Shin represents Shinayim, the teeth. Yud represents Yodayim, the hands. And Resh represents Raglayim, the legs. If you have the full usage of your eyes, of your teeth, of your hands, of your legs, then you are indeed a wealthy man. But the simple interpretation refers to the concept of appreciating the blessings that you have and not focusing on what somebody else has. And indeed, we know it is a minig Chabad, amongst other Chassidim also, that we study the Masechta, the tractate Soita. And in these days, we have learned a very, very interesting Gemara. And I'm going to quote. The Gemara tells us that Kol hanoisein einov, this is Daf Tes, Kol hanoisein einov b'masha eina shaloi, masha mevakesh ein noisnen loi, umasha biyodoi noitlin himenu. Anyone who sets his eyes upon something that is not his, you see what someone else has, and that's exactly what you want. What you seek, you are not given, and what is already in his hand, what he has, is taken away from him. And the Gemara brings us many examples. The Gemara gives us 10 examples of this principle, where we find the Gemara quotes Kayin, Kairach, Bilam, Doeg, many, many people. And I will just choose one of them, which is Kairach. We know Kairach is the individual who was responsible for this amazing miracle of the earth opening up and swallowing him together with all of his followers. And why was that? because he initiated a rebellion against Moshe Rabbeinu. But what is it that he wanted? He wanted the kahuna. He wanted to become a high priest. He wasn't satisfied with the fact that he was one of the wealthiest Jews that lived in his time. He wasn't satisfied with the fact that he was a Levi who had a very important and prominent role in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, a very spiritual role. He wasn't happy with any of that. He wanted the top. He wanted to be a high priest. So what happened? What happened was that what he wanted, he did not receive, and what he had, he lost. And ultimately, he lost his life. And there are many, many other examples. People that look and seek something that they do not have can actually destroy them. And however much money they have, it's irrelevant. Because if you're always looking over your shoulder, you'll always find somebody that has more money and more possessions and more success, and this in itself can eat you up. And that is why we are told, Ezehu Osher HaSameach B'Chelkoi, who is really wealthy? The wealth doesn't depend upon a portfolio of shares, of stocks, or bonds, or properties. A wealthy man is somebody that is satisfied with the blessings that he actually has. Now that is really a very beautiful explanation and a good characterization of part of the real realities of life. But the Baal Shem Tov takes this Mishnah and he explains it completely differently to impact upon the cosmic existence of mankind and the purpose of mankind's sojourn in this world. The Arizal teaches us that when Adam Rishon sinned, the tree of knowledge, there was a breaking of vessels. I'm not going to go into the Kabbalistic details of how and why this occurred, but the bottom line being that it caused a shattering of spiritual sparks, of spiritual godly energy. And this godly energy was dispersed throughout the world. It was the task of Adam Rishon and his descendants to find these godly sparks and to elevate them. And the Arizal says, whenever all of these sparks will be elevated, there will be no more concealment of godliness. At the moment, we do not see godliness. We only see concealment. God exists in everything. The existence of man, the existence of matter, is as a result of the God's energy that is in the matter. But do we see this godly energy? The answer is no. It is concealed. It is our task to reveal those sparks. How do we reveal those sparks? That is by utilizing physical objects for the service of God. When you take a fruit and you make a blessing, that blessing that you make will cause the sparks in the food to be elevated. And during the course of our life, it is our task to elevate the sparks that are around us. And indeed, we are told that there are sparks that are specifically and uniquely ours. It is we that need to elevate those sparks, and nobody else can elevate those sparks. And therefore, the Baal Shem Tov says, Eizehu Oshir, Hasemeach Bechelkoi. We know in life, as we have started discussing, there are many challenges. Those challenges, on whatever level they may be, are associated with elevating the sparks in those challenges. And they are uniquely our sparks that nobody else can do. It is only we that can elevate the sparks that are associated with our soul. So when we speak about the uniqueness of every single person, and this is something, as we have seen, our Rebbe conduct himself with the respect, appreciation of the value of every single person, that is simply because of the fact that every single person has a unique purpose which impacts upon the whole universe. Which is why we are told, the Gemara tells us, and the Rambam actually codifies this in his writings. And I will quote the Rambam. The Rambam in Hilchas Tshuva, in Perek Gimel, says as follows: a person should always look at himself as equally balanced between merit and sin, and the world is equally balanced between merit and sin. If he performs one sin, he tips his balance and that of the entire world to the side of guilt and brings destruction upon himself. Because what he is doing, he is causing a greater concealment of godliness. However, if he performs one mitzvah, he tips his balance and that of the entire world to the side of merit and brings deliverance and salvation to himself, to the whole world. And that is implied by what is written in Proverbs: a righteous man is the foundation of the world. It simply means that none of us know which particular person will be able to elevate the sparks that are associated with his challenge, which is going to tip the scales and cause the ultimate revelation of godliness with Mashiach to arrive. Now, we know that as Chassidim and as Chabad Chassidim, we have been guided and mentored by the Rebbe. And people have asked, how come the Rebbe was so successful in galvanizing a generation of thousands and thousands of people who will dedicate themselves to go out to the most far-flung areas of this world and to try to get a yid to do a mitzvah and to be able to sacrifice their whole life for the purpose of these individual Jews who live in these far-flung areas, and indeed not only Jews but for all of mankind. How was the Rebbe so successful in being able to implant in all of us these ideas and these ideals? And one of the answers is because the Rebbe was a living example of showing us how spiritual, godly actions actually impact upon the world, impact upon the individual world, where we see that it is not only a matter of belief for which we need a leap of faith to believe that what we do has significance or meaning, but actually he showed us again and again. And I will just share with you an episode that occurred not long after he assumed the leadership of Chabad, where a person who lived in the Williamsburg section of Brooklyn, a very wealthy guy, I believe he had a successful factory. He had one daughter, and the daughter fell deathly sick. His wife came from a Hasidic background, and she knew about the concept of going to rabbis to ask them for blessings. So she said to him, listen, the doctors are not very optimistic, so I would suggest that you go to rabbis and get them to pray for our daughter. And as time went on, the prognosis became worse and worse. He went to some rabbis and he said to them, if you promise that my daughter will be cured, I will give you $10,000. So the rabbis, being honest people, obviously, said, we can't promise, but charity is in itself a very important thing. We know that charity saves from death. So he says, no, I don't want any of that. I want a promise. If you promise me that my daughter will be cured, I will give you $10,000. Well, according to the rate of inflation, that would be worth today something like $110,000. He couldn't find a rabbi who would be prepared to promise. Somebody suggested to him that there is a new Rebbe. There's a new Hasidic Rebbe, a young man, relatively speaking, and there are many interesting stories that are told about him. Maybe you should go to him and maybe he can help you. So he came to the Rebbe, to 770 on a Saturday night, and he comes into 770 and he says, where is the Rebbe? I need to go and speak to the Rebbe. So they said that you can't go into the Rebbe, but what we'll do, we will put you in touch, we'll introduce you to Rabbi Chadakov, who was the Rebbe's secretary, the personal secretary. He speaks to Rabbi Chadakov and he tells him that my daughter has been very ill, she's become deathly ill, and now, today, the doctors have told us that it is really only a matter of hours. I need desperately to see the Rebbe, maybe he can help. So Rabbi Chadakov says, I can't promise you anything. I'll ask the Rebbe if he is prepared to see you. He goes into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe tells Rabbi Chadakov to tell this person that he should come back tomorrow morning, say at 10 o'clock. So Rabbi Chadakov tells the person, the Rebbe said you should come back at 10 o'clock. He says, why? What are you talking about? The doctors are only giving her now a couple of hours. I must see the Rebbe now. So Rabbi Chadakov, in his way, said, listen, if you believe in the Rebbe, if you believe in his blessings, then you can be assured of the fact that tomorrow morning will also be good enough. Anyway, he comes back tomorrow morning, and interestingly enough, the doctors told him that from last night, the situation of the daughter has been stabilized. Now, normally in this sickness, you either get worse or you get completely better. But she is just stabilized. So he saw already a little bit of a miracle. He goes into the Rebbe, and he tells the Rebbe the story, and he tells the Rebbe, if you promise me that she will be cured, I'll give you $10,000. So the Rebbe said, I'm not going to promise you anything. I'm just going to say to you as follows. I have a message to you, which is why I needed to wait till this morning to be able to receive the message. The message is that if you will keep a number of mitzvahs, including Shabbos, then I promise you that your daughter will be cured. without any $10,000. So he said, Rebbe, how can I possibly keep Shabbos? The other things you're asking me to do, to put on tefillin, I can put on tefillin if I'm taught how to do it. Kosher, maybe I can make my house kosher, but please leave me with the Shabbos. It's very difficult for me. That is my main day of business. The Rebbe said, I'm sorry, this is the message. If you keep Shabbos, your daughter will be cured. He said, Rebbe, listen, let's do some negotiation. Instead of $10,000, I'll promise you $20,000. The Rebbe didn't seem to take any interest in that. He says, listen, I'll give you $50,000. The Rebbe said, you're negotiating with the wrong person. There's nothing to negotiate. It is either one or the other. You keep the Shabbos, you will see that this will bring a cure for your daughter. So ultimately, what doesn't a father do for a child? So he agreed and he undertook that he will keep Shabbos. Within a short period of time, the daughter started improving until such time that she was completely came back to her health, and he came back to 770 to make a big kiddush and a Sudas Haidoya, a thank you for the major blessing that he had received. These were the stories that we young men continually were exposed to. The Rebbe showed us that keeping mitzvahs is not something that is just we are doing because we believe that this is our tradition. Keeping mitzvahs of Hashem is something that impacts upon our very existence. And therefore, when the Rebbe continued quoting to us the Rambam and the Gemara, that one person with one action can actually bring about salvation to the whole world, because it is only that person with his challenge and with the sparks that he needs to elevate that will be able to ultimately bring about the end of the exile as a result of the godly concealment coming to an end. Because what is exile? Exile is when godliness is concealed. The concept of Mashiach is when godliness will be revealed to the whole world. And it is possible that one person can make that difference. That being the case, we all want to be part of that. A generation of thousands of soldiers who have gone out to the whole world to find additional people, to elevate some more sparks, to do some more mitzvahs, to do more acts of kindness. And that ultimately will bring about the revelation. That will ultimately bring about the godly revelation of Mashiach, the Messianic era. I wish you all to continue to be safe and have a great Shabbos.